Senator Budd, thank you for being with us this morning. What a pleasure. Before we jump into policy, I want to start with a topic that is dominating headlines right now, and that is the government shutdown. I think today is day 20. And for any political junkies out there, this is actually the third longest government shutdown. We see these occasionally. This is kind of a long one. The House passed a continuing resolution to keep the government open. All eyes are sort of on the Senate right now. Can you share a little bit about the dynamics in the Senate between Republicans and Democrats and state of play with regard to the shutdown?
Well, sure. I want to give you first of all, thank you all for having me. Kirsten, great to be with you. Kirsten and I worked together on the House Financial Services Committee when I came into Congress in 2016. And I just want to lead with this. Jeb Hensarling, who was the chair at the time, and we get, who was your boss.
My mentor, yeah.
He said this to me a couple years in. He said, "You think you're here because you're good, but I want to let you know it's purely because of supply and demand." So, true economist. On the government shutdown, the House did its work under Mike Johnson, and they passed a continuing resolution to keep the government open. Basically means we're going to spend at the same levels until you can go through regular order in each of the 12 committees and pass a specific budget for the following fiscal year, which starts October 1. The House did that continuing resolution to buy them some more time to get the regular order bills done. We've passed 3 of the 12 in the Senate, but we need more. And then they have to go to conference with those and reconcile them. But right now, and this is usually that Republicans get blamed for the shutdown, but this is one of the unique circumstances where it's actually fallen on Chuck Schumer. We've got Democrats, we've got 3 Democrats that have joined the 52 supporting Republicans, so 55 total. We need to pass it with 60 because of the filibuster rule. And so we're waiting for 5 more Democrat senators to join us so that we can reopen the government. What happens is you don't even have a continuing resolution right now. So there are emergency measures that the president's doing, and for those who've been in small business or had a tight family budget at times, you've had to rob Peter to pay Paul. That's actually what's happening. When Border Patrol agents are paid, when the military is getting paid, he's actually shifting funding around. The WIC program, or Women, Infant, Children's, is supplementary, which is a very important program. That's not been funded until President Trump was able to redirect funds there. No new starts. We've got a lot of programs that we've started in this next year's military funding. I'm very optimistic. I sit on that committee, the Armed Services on the Intel Committee. A lot of these programs aren't being funded, which really protect our country, make us strong in the Indo-Pacific against China. And this is not being funded by Chuck Schumer. So we need 5 more to join us, and perhaps it'll happen in the coming weeks. We didn't know if it would be this last week's No Kings rally. We don't know if it's we don't know what his off-ramp is. He has to be able to say that he's won something, and I'm not sure at this point what that is. The longest shutdown in history is about 34 days, and I think that was in 2018 when I was
18 to 19
when I was on your committee. And but Mike Johnson has said we are barreling towards the longest shutdown in history, which would mean 34 days. That's 14 days beyond where we are now. Hopefully it's this week. I will tell you that we have put on the floor the House-passed CR, and then when I said that the 3 Democrats joined us, we have voted on that 10 times with 55 votes. And
it's a lot of times to vote.
What's the definition of insanity? Well, there you have it.
Over again, right? What do you think will be the thing that causes these, 2 groups to come together? I mean, Republicans seem pretty resolute in the position that they've taken. What do you think would be the thing that might motivate Democrats to shift position, or do you foresee Republicans potentially compromising on some of the issues that have been raised by the Democrats, some of the tax issues in the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, depending on which side of the aisle you're sitting on? Do you see anything changing in the coming days?
Yeah, that's a bit of a mystery, because I think all of us want to be reasonable here. We want to say, look, we will negotiate on some of these subsidies, but the COVID-era subsidies, which obviously COVID's over, is only, of the total increase in the premiums, only about 5% of that is due to COVID-era subsidies. So it's not substantive. we have a lot of work to do. We can work on these, but what's unclear is what is the exact off-ramp. Our position and Leader Thune's position has been, let's open the government and then we'll negotiate while we're spending at last year's levels, which, by the way, and it's sadly enough, that's still Joe Biden's budget. So we're at those levels. But we are willing to do that while we negotiate regular order.
Interesting. So, and I think the pressure will continue to grow as, of course, everyone wants to see the troops get paid, lots of federal employees feeling the stress, and, for our members, difficulty for anyone to close on a home mortgage because of the lapse of the National Flood Insurance Program. So appreciate that update from you. You're in the thick of it. Moving into a policy issue, and this is one, artificial intelligence, it's an important issue. It's getting a lot of attention. You serve on 5 different committees. That's a lot of committees for any senator to serve on. One of them is the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. And I should be calling you chairman because on that committee, you are the subcommittee chairman on science, manufacturing, and competitiveness. So I know this issue is of interest to the committee. Can you share a little bit about the committee's priorities and any areas of specific interest for you with your gavel on the subcommittee?
If I had only one committee, it would be focusing on that in the subcommittee in artificial intelligence. I think it's one of the greatest opportunities, and if we don't approach it correctly, it could be one of the biggest threats in history. It's been a term that we've been using since 1953, but we've really only been talking about it since mid-2022. It really came on the scene. So we had Michael Kratsios, who is the Office of Science and Technology Policy Director from the White House, come in, and we did a hearing, and we asked him about what is the White House policy, how can the Senate be supportive and move these concepts from the White House into statutory policy. It was very good. We're concerned that we don't have a patchwork of regulations because California would love to begin with this, and we need a preemptive federal policy. We want to make sure that the AI stack in the U.S., and that's the model, that's the programming, that's the graphical processing units like NVIDIA, that it's U.S. driven and a U.S. design, and so that really sits at the forefront of what we want to accomplish in that committee.
AI is transforming industries across the board. It's certainly having that impact on banking. I was even asking some bankers about this in preparation for this conversation with you. And in banking, it's being used for fraud prevention, credit modeling, and customer service. But the banking industry is different than a lot of these other industries. We are so heavily regulated and monitored for a lot of the things that maybe other industries aren't. So how can the banking industry help the committee better understand barriers to tech adoption, such as regulatory uncertainty and infrastructure costs?
Oh, Kirsten, I think it's like with anything that you're facing as bankers, make sure that you're in touch with ABA or North Carolina bankers, and that you're coming and seeing us. I've gotten so much education, particularly in this area when I was on the House Financial Services Committee, but I'm fascinated with this issue still. So even though I'm not on that banking committee, at least not yet. Maybe we'll add a 6th one.
From your lips to God's ears.
So please come and talk to us about this. We need to know what you're facing and to make sure that there's not a disconnect between what you all face day to day and what's happening in Washington. It's easy for that to happen, is a disconnect between DC and the rest of the world.
Oh, absolutely. It feels different traveling. I think Rob said this in his opening comments, but any opportunity sometimes to get out into other parts of the country, it feels a little bit more normal. But I'm excited. Obviously, the Trump administration is very interested in this. I'm excited by your enthusiasm. I personally am a little bit freaked out about AI. I don't want the robots to come take my job, but I've talked to a lot of bankers who are literally using it every day and finding new ways to take advantage of it. What role do you see for Congress in fostering responsible AI innovation while ensuring safety and soundness, consumer protection, and ethical standards?
I think we need to be proactive in asking for different industries, and for today, banking, what's in the way, because you don't want to choke down innovation or over-regulate it or have confusing regulations that are multi-state. So you need a federal preemption on anything that we do so that we don't have the patchwork problem. I think that's probably the most important thing. And then to make sure that it maintains our competitiveness so you don't have the offshoring of these models because they're so complex. We don't really know what's inside the DeepSeek model right now from China, but we do know that it can be used for nefarious purposes. So I would say making sure that you're staying in touch with us on this is probably the most important thing, and that there's a federal preemption.
Okay, that's helpful. We hear you. We will be in touch. We have lots of thoughts. We're happy to share them with you. And I want to move on now to a couple policy topics that are near and dear to my heart and to banking. And this is getting back to, as you mentioned, your time on the House Financial Services Committee. For folks who don't know Senator Budd, one other fun fact that I will never forget, this man cleared, I think it was a 17-person primary to be elected to the House of Representatives. 17, that's like unheard of. So I knew of you before I met you on the House Financial Services Committee, but was amazed that in his first term as a freshman congressman in the House was immediately demonstrating leadership on a number of issues that are very, very important to us. So Senator Budd has taken a strong position against price controls and rate caps, very early expressing lots of concern about policies in the Dodd-Frank Act and the Durbin Amendment specifically, which of course we very, very much appreciate. And I think it was mentioned earlier also your legislation last Congress to tell the Fed they needed to stop pursuing a proposal to lower the debit interchange cap before doing a study to actually look at how this is going to impact customers. So these are exactly the type of policies that are exceptionally important to the banking industry. We thank you for your leadership on them in the House and in the Senate. And as you mentioned, we are so grateful for the long history that North Carolina has had on the banking committee. So we would love to see you make that move, hopefully next Congress. But as we think about our continued opposition to the so-called Credit Card Competition Act, so Durbin 1.0 was focusing on debit. There has been movement in Congress to try to expand those government mandates and price controls over into the credit market. And it's a tough issue, I think, for many. And I know Senator Budd is actually a former retailer, but for many in Congress who weren't bankers or retailers, talking about routing, it's sort of a dry issue. It's a little bit hard to explain. So we've had to work really hard to push back efforts to expand the Durbin Amendment, essentially, to credit. And what advice we've been successful so far, but it's a battle every time. And we have some in Congress who are working to add that legislation as an amendment to anything that is considered must pass. In Congress, what advice do you have to help us fight this effectively?
Well, you differentiated between 1.0, which was debit card related, and 2.0, credit card related. I lived in this city, was not involved in politics during 1.0, and I had a wonderful debit card from a well-known bank here, headquartered here, and I got points on that debit card for an airline. And after Durbin 1.0 passed, I no longer, they just sent me a plain debit card with no rewards. So while it's fine for me to move to a credit product, there's some families out there that probably shouldn't move to credit products. But this forced people away from a debit product, which may have been better for them, to credit products. So they may have gotten in trouble with those. That's an issue of its own. But I just think that if you do this, it's going to drive people, it's going to reduce people's options. There are people that they live on those rewards. It's going to take those rewards away. And I'm not just a former retailer. I still own a business. I still look at P&Ls and statements of cash flow and balance sheets every week, every month. So I'm in touch with this. And I see that line on the P&L for the credit card expenses. But it enables sales. And credit cards are already competitive. They're already competing with other products.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are debit cards, there's cash, there's checks, there's ACH, and there's lots of other ways. I mean, some people are even accepting crypto for payments. So there's plenty of competition already out there. But this would squeeze people in a way that doesn't need to happen. Yeah,
and I think you made a really good point too in talking about the consumer harm, right? When we were debating these issues on the debit side during the development of the Dodd-Frank Act, there were promises of reduced costs to consumers, and we all know consumers didn't see any of
Never
that.
happened.
They saw what you mentioned. They saw sort of an evaporation of debit offerings and free checking accounts. And so we're trying to make those points. It's been difficult, but appreciate your guidance and also appreciate your continued leadership in the Senate as we are fighting hard to ensure that this either legislation or amendment isn't attached to anything that could be moving. So we'll keep those lines of conversation open with you.
That's really important what you just said, because they will try to sneak that on, the so-called Credit Card Competition Act, onto the National Defense Authorization Act.
Right.
So they'll try to attach it to anything that's a must-move bill, not this continuing resolution that we're navigating right now, but anything that's one of the major bills, they'll try to stick it on.
We will remain vigilant, and we appreciate your help. We talked a little bit about competitiveness. You were talking about competitiveness with China. As the banking industry, we are thinking about competitiveness all the time, and that's both our banks of all sizes being able to compete with one another, survive and compete with one another, but also so much competition coming from other entities that are not regulated the same way that banks are, or don't pay taxes the same way that banks do. So that could be credit unions, farm credit, any number of non-bank lenders who to a consumer may look or feel like a bank, but they're not regulated the way we are and subject to prudential oversight and consumer protections. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about regulatory relief. And obviously this administration has been very focused on that. Can you share a little bit about how important regulatory relief is for banks and how Republicans in the Senate are thinking about that important issue?
When able, I hope you go back, if you haven't already read it or watched it, go back and see Secretary Bessent's speech on October 9th that he delivered talking about reg relief. I think you've got the right mindset, whether it's in banking or any other business entity in our country. It probably has, and I've heard this from President Trump, regulatory relief has more benefit than tax cuts in our country, because it simplifies things, it deconstricts businesses, it enables them to grow and to be the leaders and the innovators that you should be. Regulatory, while we need some, we're in an environment, especially post-Dodd-Frank, where there's very few de novo banks, I think 6 compared to pre-Dodd-Frank, maybe over 100 per year. So it is obviously choked down innovation and the startups of new banks and anything we can do to deregulate. One of the things that coming onto the committee years ago with you, and it was in 2016, so post-passage of Dodd-Frank, and when I would meet with so many different leaders of banks and folks like yourselves, I would hear over and over that the fastest growing department in each of your banks was the compliance department. Now, why you need compliance, it does not need to be the fastest growing department in your bank. And so that's tremendously concerning. And we have a spirit that desires to roll that back now, not just in President Trump, but in those he's appointed to the administration.
Which we just got to hear from one of those important people. So agree with that, and thank you for the help. Thank you for your vote in support of the Congressional Review Act on the CFPB's overdraft rule. I think a great example of regulatory overreach and where we've gotten help from this administration and this Congress. Speaking of competitiveness, though, just one other issue I wanted to raise with you. The House and Senate both recently passed the Genius Act. This is stablecoin legislation. We know that this was really important to the Trump administration. It was important to Chairman Scott and Chairman Hill. And there were a lot of wins for the banking industry in that legislation. Yet at the same time, we don't know what the stablecoin market is going to look like. And I think there's also some concern, particularly on behalf of community banks, about their ability to be able to participate in any sort of stablecoin market, but also about a potential outflow of deposits from banks into other entities. And so that's something we're very concerned about as we think about preserving banks' ability to survive, thrive, be competitive. So I wanted to ask, now that the Genius Act has been signed into law and it's over in the hands of the regulators to promulgate that regulatory framework, what can Congress still play a role in helping ensure that framework creates an environment where banks of all sizes, but especially community banks, can continue to be competitive?
It absolutely can. So what you're seeing, for instance, with Coinbase, and if you're holding Circle, I think for those, they would pay an effective yield of 4.1%, which sounds like a high yield savings account, but it's not. It's in the form of rewards, not technically in interest. So there's an equivalent in there. I think that the banks are rightly concerned about an outflow. How we regulate this, does it happen on the regulatory side with Treasury? Does it happen, do we actually put it into law? I'm not sure yet. So I think it's a wait and see. Let's watch this. This is very early, and Genius just passed a month or two ago. So let's wait and see. Mike Rounds made some comments on this recently.
That's right.
I think it was pretty important to say, we want to do something, but we're not sure the right way, and you don't want us to move too fast in a ham-fisted way. Because again, this is a very pro-crypto administration. I'm for this, but I hope these stay in the proper lane. I don't want them to compete with one another, but I do want both to flourish.
Yes, and Genius was very clear about a prohibition on interest yield rewards for stablecoin issuers. We are concerned about there being a workaround that in market structure where exchanges may try to offer that. And so that's something we're continuing to work on with members of the Senate Banking Committee and just everyone in the Senate to raise those concerns and look forward to continuing the conversation with Congress. Genius moved very quickly, and so anytime something's moving quickly, there may need to be additional steps taken. But so we appreciate your support on those issues and look forward to continuing that conversation with you.
And that's one of those things where you'll need to keep us informed. How is it affecting you all? So again, as you visit us in Washington, D.C., as you're in touch with Kirsten and ABA, please keep us informed.
We will do it. We have lots to say to you on that topic. The audience heard a little bit from Governor Stein earlier about Hurricane Helene. We are sort of still in the aftermath of that. You have been absolutely fighting tooth and nail to get funding from DHS and from FEMA for recovery efforts. Can you give us an update on the state of recovery at the moment as you see it?
Sure. And I would say even after President Trump was elected and before he was in office, his first visit was to Western North Carolina. And so he is all in for restoring Western North Carolina. And for those of you all who have branches out there, those of you all have family or live out there, we are 100% with you. While the governor and I may be from different parties, we are in lockstep in working to get Western North Carolina back up and running. It's one of those great areas where it doesn't matter your political background. We want that area to be restored again. I was up there last week. One of the things we did, which really helps small businesses, is we delayed some scheduled repaving unrelated to the hurricane so that the parkway could stay open, so that the small businesses around there could flourish. So it's things like that we do. But also funding at DHS, we think it had gotten caught in a bureaucratic quagmire, and we just really want to force their hand. We've placed, one of the powers of the Senate is you can place holds on nominees, even of your own party. So we have placed a hold on DHS nominees until we get this resolved. I'm in communication with the Secretary to make sure that everything requested that fits the parameters of FEMA and DHS is actually transacted and actually makes it to the state to get distributed to where it needs to in Western North Carolina.
I know our North Carolina banks have done so much to try to help with these efforts. I know that they appreciate seeing what you're doing at the federal level to try to get those resources that are still desperately needed to support those impacted. So we thank you again.
Well, NCBA, I believe, set up a fund. ABA did as well. Thank you all for that. Thank you for your personal contribution. Look, this is a great state that hosts groups like Samaritan's Purse. They're usually helping people around the world and around the country. This happened right in their own backyard. A lot of you all went and volunteered with them and with other groups. Thank you from me personally to what you all did, not just as bankers, but as individuals. It's made a lot of a difference for our state.
We appreciate hearing that. I can't believe we're out of time. That went really quickly. All please join me in thanking Senator Budd for being with us this morning.
Thank you.